2011 GT3RS, and this isn't going to be just a regular review, just because this isn't a regular car. So, comfortability, yeah, the bucket seats are comfortable for my body type, but if you're any bigger, it's probably not going to work. My car does have the Sharkworks track exhaust on it right now, so it's super loud. But this car right now, I just got done driving back to back my car and my buddy's 991 GT3RS, not the 992. I've never driven one of those since it just came out literally a couple weeks ago. So this car makes 450 horsepower and 317 foot-pounds of torque. But like when I raced my buddy in his 991 GT3RS, which has headers and exhaust, I mean, he really only beat me from 40 to 140 on a roll race by like 2 cars at the top end of it. I mean, for what this car is, 2011, manual, older generation, his car is a PDK, less horsepower, less torque. I'm actually very shocked on the performance of this car. I think a lot of it has to do with drivetrain loss in the new ones. As a manual, less drivetrain loss. Something about the rawness of this model being manual that just, I don't know, you just can't really compare it to the new one, because, you know, enthusiasts, reviewers from Chris Harris to Jeremy Clarkson still say that this is the ultimate driving Porsche. It's not a car that is for the faint of heart, because, like, look, I had to heel toe on the downshift earlier back there. I had to make sure that I was in the right gear. Make sure when you're downshifting in crazy spirited driving that you're not doing a money shift, which is technically a mechanical overrev, which a lot of these cars get too, from third to second gear. When I'm in top of third, coming down to second on a tight corner, or even top of fifth, and some dudes actually come down to second. You know, that's where the mechanical overrevs happen in these cars, when they're being tracked heavily or driven really hard. So you really have to know what you're doing when you're actually downshifting, trying to heel toe, trying to manage where the car's sitting in terms of on the road, in terms of the balance. That is one thing about this car, because I've driven the new one and I drove this one back to back since I owned this one. It was like perfect way to test out the true feel between both. And the front of the new one is a lot bigger and a lot wider, which you can actually feel when you're driving, but when you start throwing the car around in corners, it still feels pretty nimble. But this car, the front track is so narrow that it actually feels more so like a go-kart. Like, I've also driven another car in comparison, which is a lot different from this one, which is an Aventador S, and the Porsche GT3RS, the new one, kind of reminds me of the Aventador S, where the front is really wide and big, which is great for the track, because, you know, when you're doing high speed and that more high speed cornering and that crazy amount more of downforce that new model has, which I don't even know how much more downforce it has, but I think it's like 30 or 40% more than this car overall, but don't quote me on it, because you can always look up the statistics on Google. But just the way that this car handles, it just wants to eat the apex, because the front end is so light. Like, the track from this one to the previous generation 997.1 GT3RS was totally different, because I think this one is around 3 to 4 inches wider. The rear is a 325, the front is a 265. I'll have to double check the tire size in the front, but I believe it's a 265. Another thing about this car is that I don't know how you could not get it with bucket seats. Just the bucket seats hold you in so well, and also it makes you feel the car a lot better in terms of you can actually feel what the car is trying to do, as opposed to when I think you're in a comfort seat. Personally, it just doesn't do that. You can't really feel the car as much. Your butt's sliding around all over the place. In this scenario, you're not sliding around. You're just locked in. It reminds me of my track 240 SX that I had, where you're on the track and you're just not moving at all. The nice part about these seats for my body type is they're super comfortable. I actually prefer them over the comfort seats. Everyone, as in one of my friends kept saying, oh, not going to like them. You're going to want comforts. Well, for my body type, this is perfect. And another cool thing that this car has that I was messing with was it has the Chrono Lap Timer too on the dash. So if you're at the track, your little dongle's right here. You can tap it. Here, let's do it right now, actually. So when you have the lap timer going, and let's say you're going on the next lap, you can just tap it once and it'll go to the new lap, and it'll save it in the settings here on your dash. It'll just say new lap, and the timer will continue to go, which is pretty sweet. So you just tap it here at the dongle, boom, new lap, registers in the system. And then if you have the tool for it, which I believe is an OBD2 plug, where you can pick up the log data from the actual car. So if you're doing a track day, you can see your actual lap time saved to the car, which is a pretty sick feature. So the red line on this car is, I believe, I want to say it's like 84 or 8350, just depends. It's hard to tell because it doesn't actually have an exact. It's like a little bit under 85, so I'm guessing like around 83-ish. But the car's torque, which is interesting, if you go look at any of the dyno graphs on the internet of this car being put on a dyno, the horsepower climbs, obviously, like most any car, it climbs through the RPM range all the way up to redline. But the torque also slowly climbs in around 6,800 or 6,750 is where the peak torque of this car is actually made. So that's why I think these cars, just from the factory, handle so well, is because they can put the power down and they don't have crazy torque on the low end, where they're not spinning the tires in second gear on tight corners at 45, 50 miles an hour, and you're coming out. You can literally be half throttle out of the corner and then be flat-footed, as opposed to a lot of cars that I've driven where rear-wheel drive, like a 488, even a 458 for some reason, even though it's a little lower torque, I feel like it was still wanting to break loose. It was still hard to put the power down in a car like that. It wasn't necessarily, I wouldn't say it's as enjoyable as a car like this. This is why I think Porsche does such a great job with their cars. It's because they actually take the time to understand what a driver wants and needs. And we all know that, like these new cars that you see, like the 720s with so much horsepower and torque, well, the problem is you can't put any of that power down. You can't use it even on the track. You can't even use it on the street. And cars like this, where you can actually enjoy, where you can be at full throttle using all of the horsepower, all of the RPM ranges through all of the gears, it's a lot different of a driving experience because it's more enjoyable. Goes all the way up to 8,500 RPM. Thing just screams. This car, when you're driving, it just wants to eat the corners. It literally just wants to keep diving into the apex and just digs the front end into the corner, and you're just kind of like, when is it going to stop? Like, when is the car actually like, hey, I've had enough, it's time to understeer? I just haven't experienced that with this car. This car too, it's so stable on the high speeds because it's almost 2,000 pounds of downforce at 90 miles an hour. So when you're coming into a corner hot like this, it's just stable. You can feel the asset just hooking. It's like, it becomes an F1 car. It's like, I wish I had a button for a DRS, drag reduction system, when you hit the straightaway, just because the car just becomes a different animal after 90 than it does at 45, 50. The air on this car is factory Porsche. And you can feel it right now. Right about now, you feel the car just start squatting. Because that downforce of that wing is just brutal. We're coming into this corner at 100. It does not feel like 100 at all. It's so stable, the car. It's not even funny. We just went through those corners at 100. That did not feel like 100. I was looking down, had to check 3 times if it was 100. Wow. How do I feel about it? It's the first question everyone's gonna ask. That's the first question everybody asks, no matter what. How do you feel about your car? Oh my God, I love it. Nobody understands it. If you never experienced cars in the way like you can experience a car like this on the road, in a way where you don't have to beat on it tremendously to actually enjoy the spirited drive. You go to work on a back road in 4th gear at 5,000 RPM and just be cruising through, just hearing the exhaust note. The driving experience is different. It's like, the closest I could honestly describe it in a way is like when you're going for a nice cruise. If you've ever had a motorcycle, I used to have one, and it kind of feels like that. You don't have to push it to actually enjoy it. The car's styling, I think it's timeless. I mean, it still looks like it's a 2018, 2019, 2020. It could come out today and be totally fine with it. I've been trying to find out the actual number for downforce on this car online, but it's hit or miss. Some dudes are like 1,000 pounds of downforce at 80. Some dudes said 400 pounds of downforce at 90. Some other guys said 1,200. So I don't even know. I don't even know if, I've never been able to find it. I've found rumors and stuff, but nothing official from Porsche, so I'm not even gonna say. I know I said some random numbers in the video, but they're all random numbers I found online. Another thing about the car that I think is pretty badass is you have some of the radiators up here. So I believe one of them, I think they're both actual radiators, and the air flows through here. And then this is also air that helps when it travels over the front bumper of the car. It actually helps push the air down and creates almost like a suction towards the ground, sort of like kind of like F1 cars do, but not to that extent. The wider track on the 997.2 Gt3RS also. So according to some of the design guys, you actually have to manufacture this light specialty where it bubbles out, where to meet up with this flare and this fender liner. The wider track, they actually just did like a little over fender type of deal to cover the actual extra 2 to 3 inch width. And this light, they actually said that it took them a long time to design and figure out how they're going to do it. The engineering for that light was something like almost $1 million, and just trying to figure out the engineering behind it, not even material or anything, just because the way it bevels in and out, you can kind of catch it on a camera, but it's more like, it's more experience in person to actually see the crazy groove. This has a Sharkworks track exhaust. I love it. I think it even makes the car look better in the back. It looks crazy aggressive. It sounds insane. We'll get some nice clips from the outside of it ripping by. And then the signature Guards Red. So this is all factory Guards Red. So Guards Red wheels, Guards Red sticker. Everything's painted. That's the sticker on the fender, of course, not painted, but painted Guards Red. Then the front little lipstick front end is Guards Red too. The lightweight carbon bucket package. With the nice red seat belts, which I think from the factory it's like a $14,000 or $13,000 option. So to wrap up the car, it's timeless. It looks timeless. It still looks like a 2020. If it came out today, you would still be like, oh, it's a brand new car. People don't even know the year of the car. The guys that don't know anything about cars, or women or kids, are just like, oh my gosh, a brand new car. Overall, to sum it up, speed, sound, handling. The sound the car makes, it literally is like a cross between a jet fighter with this exhaust and a street bike mixed with the sound of like a Lamborghini. It's like unbelievable the type of sounds this car makes at high RPMs, which you'll hear in some of these sound clips at the end of the video. To sum it up, if you can buy one, if you can afford it, do it, experience it. You'll never lose $1 on this car. They're appreciating daily, weekly. They're just not a car that you're going to see. They're true on the road. It's not like, oh, some other guy next door to you is going to have it. This really is one of those one-off cars where it's an enthusiast driven car, like especially for me, where I grew up on 240s, E46 M3, E92, some of these really enthusiast cars that were coming out for our generation, my generation. You know, we couldn't afford stuff like this. So overall, it's the best car you'll ever drive, in my opinion.